students, and everyone who is here. Good evening. We need to be excited. Good evening. It's our pleasure and honor to host our Prime Cabinet Secretary today here at USIU, because at USIU we nurture students to be leaders and to be problem solvers. We also bring in leaders to articulate their vision and share it out with the younger population and also with scholars who then take these matters and try to see how then can we tackle the huge issues that we face as a country, as a continent, and as generally across the globe. So that is our mantra, and this public lecture is so important to us because it helps us hear from the core, because His Excellency is actually at the core of it and understands a lot of dynamics that then help us to improve what we do as an institution. So my job is simply to welcome you and say, Hati, we are honored to have you here with us today to have this public lecture. I have my chair of the University Council, who I will invite to come over, give his brief remarks, and then he will invite you to speak to us. Thank you. Mr. Chris Senanu is the chair of the University Council of USIU Africa.
Good evening. Hey, that's not how we do it in USIU. Good evening. Fantastic. That sounds more like the USIU I went to, I believe in, and I still continue to support. His Excellency, Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary, welcome to USIU. Members of staff, faculty council, student council, students, and other friends of USIU, welcome for this public lecture. We are very, very honored today to have His Excellency here. Dr. Mudavadi is the Cabinet Secretary, the Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs in the Republic of Kenya. A decorated leader and policymaker with extensive experience at the helm of various cabinet ministerial dockets. Dr. Mudavadi was the 7th Vice President of the Republic of Kenya in 2002 and the Deputy Prime Minister from 2008 to 2013. Dr. Musalia entered politics at the age of 28 and served as the Member of Parliament for the Sabatia constituency from 1989 to 2002, and again from 2007 to 2013. Dr. Musalia's other political credentials include running for president in 2013 and holding several leadership positions in Kenya Kwanza ministerial position. As finance minister in the early 90s, he courageously led extensive liberalization and deregulation of the Kenyan economy. In information and communication, he is credited for liberalization of the communication sector into the current vibrant sector for free media and ICT successes such as Safaricom, Access Kenya, and other telecommunication companies. Myself, part of my experience, or rather my exposure in the telecommunication industry, came about because of certain liberalizations and things done in ICT industry when you were in that ministry. So, as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Local Government, he was in charge of the implementation of devolution under the Constitution that was promulgated in 2010. And he's also hailed for pushing acts in Parliament that entrenched the current devolved system of governance. Dr. Musalia received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Land Economics in 1984 from the University of Nairobi. He's a member of the Institute of Surveyors of Kenya, a registered valuer, and was awarded an honorary doctorate of humane letters in peace and sustainable development by Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology in 2022. Dr. Mudavadi is married to Mrs. Teresa Musalia, and they are blessed with 3 children. Karibu, His Excellency. We are honored to have you here, and as you rightfully said, you wish you were now a student because obviously, I'm sure you've seen the beautiful grounds that our students get to learn in. I am not going to give any remarks because I'm too excited to hear Dr. Mudavadi speak, so please, Karibu.
Good evening. The university leadership, professors, students, members of USIU community, ladies and gentlemen, first let me just say thank you for inviting me. When Professor Munene sent word, I knew this good gentleman contributes a lot to matters foreign policy. And I was worried that if I didn't turn up, I may get a battering in one of his articles. So I'm not saying that he will not do that, but at least he'll moderate it. At the same time, it is always a pleasure to be able to come to talk to talented people, students, on matters that are of very, very important concern to all of us. We all live in a world that there are too many moving parts, and once in a while, you may not know which part will actually have serious implications at your doorstep. So here we are to be able to talk. I'll give a fairly comprehensive statement, and I thought it's important to do so because I took the invitation very seriously, extremely seriously, and I thought that it would be a very good moment for us to share what we think, to get a feedback, to provoke thought, and through your contributions, we can also be sharpened and be able to make Kenya better in terms of its status as a leading nation and emerging nation as we go forward. So please bear with me as I make these remarks. But I'm sure I will leave enough time for that interaction at the end, because it's also critical that we have that opportunity. So let me once again say I am pleased that you are all here, and thank you for turning up. Allow me to begin by congratulating the university management, the leadership, faculty, students, and the USIU fraternity for inviting me to this beautiful and coveted institution to share my ideas on the Kenya's grand strategy. I am honored to have been invited and indeed pleased to be here to raise discussions on a topic of great significance to our nation. This is yet another opportunity to come here since the last time I was invited by the former Vice-Chancellor, Professor Frida Brown. Therefore, for this opportunity, I specifically thank Professor Munene Macharia for inviting me. In speaking about Kenya's grand strategy, in a changing world. I have structured my presentation into 4 parts. First, I will explore the context of the international relations environment that portrays the changing world. Second, I will interrogate the concept of grand strategy in its evolution and how I consider it in the contemporary international relations. Next is to present Kenya's grand strategy given the evolving global arena. And finally, I will wrap up with brief remarks on Kenya's foreign priorities and the centrality of our national interests. So let me start with an overview of the international environment. There's a famous saying from a wise man that wisdom is to live in tune with the mode of the changing world. I will repeat. Wisdom is to live in tune with the mode of the changing world. Therefore, I want to discuss Kenya's grand strategy in the changing world. But before I do, let me take a few minutes to give an overview of the international environment within which Kenya's grand strategy is envisaged and implemented. Today, international relations are at a turning point in history. Indeed, it is becoming clear that the global balance of power is transforming. The world is experiencing a shift in global order as new alliances and rivalries emerge. The old unipolar or bipolar order has given way to the forces of the next world order. The emerging powers, new actors, evolving interests, and the assertiveness of developing states are recalibrating the global status quo. We are witnessing a more complex and fragmented world system where global multilateralism is on the verge of crisis and is beckoning reforms. Global governance is increasingly being distorted and weakened by the pressure of unilateralism and protectionism. States, especially leading powers, continue to undermine international organizations and institutions in pursuit of their short-term geopolitical interests. The global powers are embroiled in mischievous and dangerous intrigues, pursuing unilateralism and militarism, hence undermining the global values and established international relations principles of human solidarity, human rights, sovereignty, rule of law, democracy, and diplomacy. The outcome is diminished global leadership and a lack of collective approach to global crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine war, and the Gaza crisis. The latter has spilled into the Red Sea crisis, which is now threatening our region's maritime strategic interests. Increasingly, states are beset with global dangers such as violent extremism, interstate violent conflicts, climate change risks, pandemics, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and economic volatility, among other severe human security threats. Additionally, states across the world find themselves in a complex situation of competition, confrontation, and cooperation. As such, rising and traditional powers are currently engaged in a new scramble for Africa, literally transforming the continent into a new theater of Cold War resurgence. Consequently, the region and continent are becoming vulnerable to geopolitical manipulations by these competing powers. We need to be cautious as a continent, Since this new scramble for Africa, and indeed the renewed zero-sum Cold War mentality, will potentially fragment the region and weaken African regional organizations such as the AU, IGAD, and EAC, amongst others. Under these circumstances, Kenya must pursue a robust, pragmatic, and strategic foreign policy hinged on diplomatic wisdom and tact. Kenya will endeavor to lead the region and continent in rallying a common and well-coordinated diplomatic response to the new scramble and geopolitical influences by emerging and traditional powers. This is to ensure the security and prosperity of our people, as well as promote regional cooperation and peaceful coexistence for mutual benefit. Let me come to the concept of grand strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let me now interrogate the concept of grand strategy. Since conceptually, grand strategy is all-encompassing, my focus will be on the grand strategy for foreign relations, which is not only restricted to military or defense strategy, but includes a wide range of international activities that are aimed at advancing Kenya's strategic interests in the global arena. The aim is to highlight certain issues that will inform your academic debate later. In an ever-evolving global arena, a grand strategy enables the country to develop anticipatory policies that will empower it to navigate the dynamic landscape of the 21st century international relations. Historically, grand strategy was more concerned with military sources of power to pursue and secure national interests. However, today, non-military sources of power have increasingly become essential. These include diplomacy, economy, and technology. Thus, in this contemporary world, a grand strategy is not only for war times, but also during peace and development. Notably, militarization in foreign policy seems to be yielding ground to geoeconomics. Even as some actors continue to use force as a means of global influence, geoeconomics is largely being embraced where states focus on the use of economic tools such as trade policies, foreign investment, global financial systems, economic sanctions, foreign aid, and grants to promote and defend their national interests and achieve imperative geopolitical objectives. The grandness of the strategy is based on the fact that the policy goals and interests are long-term rather than immediate or short-term. In sum, our collective policy strategies constitute a grand strategy. Our grand strategy employs economic, diplomatic, defense, technological, and other means to achieve foreign policy objectives. We as policy practitioners and government seek to manage and maximize all state resources, which, by the way, are very limited, in achieving Kenya's national interests. And an efficient way of doing this is through a grand strategy. I have just noted that the term grand strategy is absent or not frequently used in media and public policy discourses. Apparently, it remains confined to academic debates, as we are doing now. Therefore, today's topic is timely. It speaks to the need to ignite public discussions on grand strategy beyond academia. We need to be strategic in our foreign policy projection in this rapidly changing world that is said to be volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous. Let me dwell a little more on Kenya's grand strategy in a changing world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now narrow down to Kenya's grand strategy in this evolving world system. From this end, I can confirm that Kenya's foreign policy outlook is replete with opportunities and risks that are being shaped by global critical geopolitics. So our grand strategy is a necessity for the survival of our state, as well as the pursuit of global opportunities for the prosperity, peace, and security of our nation. The framework of approach to this discussion is that states must look after their self-interests in an international system of competition for power and all that contributes to the attainment of national interests. Therefore, states must design and implement grand strategies for their survival. To begin with, I may summarize our foreign policy philosophy as that of being global in scope, but Pan-African in nature. We adhere to a globally relevant Pan-Africanism for mutually beneficial relations, where Kenya plays a leading role in an Africa that is willing and equipped to negotiate for its rightful space in the international arena. Kenya champions and remains committed to the interests of Africa in international relations. This is why Kenya's position is that as much as we highlight the global crisis, such as Gaza and Ukraine-Russia conflicts, we should not forget the ongoing crisis and intractable conflicts in our continent, which continue to kill our people and impoverish the continent. We must confront the uncomfortable truth that Africa's conflicts and crises are too often quickly relegated to the sidelines of international discourse as soon as supposedly priority conflicts emerge in other parts of the world. This crisis of humanitarianism is with us today. In short, you find a Kenyan, an African, whether from the south, from the east, from the north, or from the west, talking to you more about Gaza and Ukraine and telling you nothing about Sudan and South Sudan and DRC. They'll tell you more about those other conflicts and not tell you anything about our own conflicts. But now, let me just put this into perspective so that we can understand the crisis in Africa. The evolving global peace and security challenges have compounded the challenges of our time. As of 2023, over 37 million people had been forcibly displaced in Africa. That is just last year. 37 million people displaced, either within their own countries or beyond the borders of their own countries. In the period between 2019 and 2024, the UNHCR reports that conflict fatalities from selected African countries reached 208,000. Further conflicts continue to be major drivers of the food crisis in Africa. It is estimated that 121 million Africans are facing severe acute food insecurity, and 82% of this number are in the conflict-affected countries. That means Africa's conflicts, in reality, has caused more harm to humanity than all those other conflicts that we spend more time talking about. Further, the crises on the continent have led to the damage and closure of thousands of schools, translating into an estimated 98 million children in Africa being out of school. 98 million children, the majority of them in conflict-affected areas. What will we call that generation? What will we call them? How will we treat them? We have seen that countries that, even in the neighborhood, when they had instability, they have taken well over 30 years to come out of a crisis. So what happens to Africa when 98 million children are out of school? Therefore, although acknowledging the interconnectedness of conflicts and crises globally and regionally, Kenya stands for global solidarity, equity, fairness, and collective security where crises receive equal attention. Kenya supports the view that security threats in one part of the world should be treated as a threat to the entire world, and all actors should collectively address it. So, in the shadow of the global conflicts, let us not forget the silent suffering of our own people in Africa. Similarly, Kenya notes the geostrategic constraints that landlocked countries face are increasingly becoming major drivers of conflicts on the continent. Brothers and sisters, there are 16 landlocked countries in Africa with a combined estimated population of 378 million people. They rely on their brothers and sisters who have a coastline. So basically, 400 million people are landlocked. Kenya advocates for the establishment of a contract group or working group to discuss, negotiate, and assess the concerns of the often forgotten landlocked countries and sticking contentious issues or conflicts related to maritime access. For instance, what is the plight of landlocked countries in Africa, given the complex global crisis impacting on our continent and the East Africa region? For example, the Red Sea waterway crisis. Many East African states have been affected economically and security-wise. However, when the cost of shipping, freight insurance, and goods goes up due to the Red Sea crisis, the impact is possibly double for the landlocked states that rely on the coastal countries. Kenya has a remarkable record of contributing to the maintenance of peace, international peace and security. Kenya remains committed to seeking peace and security in Somalia, Sudan, and the DRC, amongst others. Unfortunately, the crises in these states seem to be sliding into globally forgotten conflicts as international actors shift their attention to other supposedly pressing wars in the Middle East and Eastern Europe. In the hour of need, Kenya has always stepped forward as the brother's keeper. Presently, Kenya's peace diplomacy is fine-tuned and more purposeful. Our country has developed strategies to reap the dividends of its peace diplomacy. Kenya is fully committed to the principle of peaceful coexistence and non-interference and respect for sovereignty. We believe that it is in this way that we can enjoy positive reciprocity and our sovereignty being respected too. Kenya views the international system as not structured in a binary of West or East. As a state, we endeavor to be at peace with other states and seek to establish mutually beneficial ties with as many states as possible in the world. The zero-sum Cold War approach has to be replaced with cooperation, mutual respect, and collective security. Likewise, global issues of consequence such as climate change, global health diplomacy, conflicts, and socioeconomic challenges cannot be addressed by one state, nor by linear, rigid alliances based on the South-North or East-West poles. Greater collective action and coordination in global governance are now needed more than ever. The United Nations remains the main platform for global governance. Thus, Kenya continues to promote adherence to the UN Charter as the best way of responding to global questions of our time. Moreover, collective security, international rules, and global trade and financial norms must be pursued within a framework of multilateralism and mutual non-aggression. The 19th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Non-Aligned Movement was held early this year in Uganda. With a membership of 120+ countries, the movement stands as the largest group of countries after the United Nations. Kenya endorses the movement's agenda of increasing cooperation among developing states to influence global affairs. In this regard, Kenya continues to strategically pursue positive non-alignment. To quote a former British Prime Minister, who was also once the Foreign Secretary, Lord Palmerston, he said this: "We have no eternal allies. We have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual, and those interests are our duty to pursue." Let me repeat that. We have no eternal allies. We have no perpetual enemies. Our interests are eternal and perpetual, and those interests are our duty to pursue. We support the view that global governance should operate within a reformed multilateral framework. For instance, Kenya advocates for a multilateral trade and financial system that is founded on equity, inclusion, and fairness, one that promotes prosperity for all and does not prioritize the dominance of one or a few. Ladies and gentlemen, the essence of contemporary diplomatic relations is mutual benefit. Regional integration provides a huge opportunity for win-win diplomatic outcomes. Kenya will continue to strengthen its position in the development and leadership of integration in the East Africa region by leveraging its geostrategic location, skilled human resources, and advanced economy in the region. The gradual and pragmatic expansion of the East African community is good for our region's economic prosperity, peace, and security. The entry of Somalia is the beginning of the expansion of the regional bloc towards the Horn of Africa. This hornwards expansion of the East African community is welcome, as it will not only solidify efforts towards peace and security in the entire Eastern Africa, but it will also open tremendous economic opportunities for our people in the region. The friendly and cooperative ties with our neighborly states within the East African community are the #1 reference point of our foreign policy. As a region, we have become increasingly interdependent. Hence, trade tensions and absolute detachment are no longer justifiable within our East African community. The future of our region and continent depends on deepening integration and not deepening divisions. Kenya, as a core state in the region and Africa, is committed to the promotion of intra-Africa trade under the collective aspirations of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Union's agenda of visa liberalization to foster Africa's integration. The President of Kenya, not too long ago, made the pronouncement of Kenya being a visa-free country. Kenya engages in transnational infrastructural connectivity to enhance intra-Africa trade and people-to-people relations. Kenya continues to steer its economic diplomacy for the development of our country and prosperity of its people. Kenya aims to be a competitive export-led economy and responsive job creation for our people. We will focus on fostering sustainable development and economic growth through diversification, innovation, strategic partnerships. These include strategic economic partnerships agreement with the EU, strategic trade and investment partnership with the USA, comprehensive economic bilateral agreements with Japan, China, the United Arab Emirates, to mention a few. In our grand plan going forward, these strategic agreements will be unbundled and frequently explained to our citizens. Globally, developing states have become assertive, and this is no exception with our republic. Like all state actors in the international system, we should operate by the real politic maxim that our nation is a unitary and rational actor in international relations. It faces the outside world as a monolithic actor representing the proud citizens of Kenya. This indeed is what defines our patriotism. Remember that foreign policy is a function of domestic policy. Our internal unity of purpose and love of our country will positively project Kenya's position and image in the global arena. This is what attracts foreign investment, opens lucrative opportunities for our people, and enhances partnerships that transform the lives of Kenyans from the bottom up. Thus, in our grand plan, we want to close the missing link between the country's foreign policy and the citizens' understanding and engagement in our international affairs. This is to be achieved through direct public participation or advanced parliamentary engagements on foreign policy. Parliamentary democracy has become important in global affairs. For years, successful administrations have been shying away from engaging and sharing their foreign policy with Parliament. It is my intention to break away from this in our grand foreign policy plan. Parliament is a key player. Indeed, our global image as a leading democracy in the region cannot be gainsaid. Strengthening parliamentary democracy, deepening the rule of law, and empowering institutions to fight corruption informs our grand strategy. Kenya has an impeccable history of on-schedule democratic transfer of power. This is a very strong message. Very strong. No matter the criticisms we have, no matter what happens, from the day we got independence, it's now over 60 years, Kenya has always held their general election. You may criticize the process. You may criticize the outcome. You may petition in court. You may demonstrate through maandamano. But the reality is that Kenya has always held its elections. And Kenya has also been the first state in the region where a presidential election has been nullified by the Supreme Court, and we did not degenerate into chaos, but respected the rule of law and went back to the people to make their final decision. Don't ever underestimate that aspect about Kenya. This, ladies and gentlemen, will be backed by a reformed and effective foreign service, a robust diaspora engagement, a skilled and innovative workforce for domestic and global service, and a dynamic, patriotic citizenry. Our foreign service is under the technical direction of two youthful and vibrant principal secretaries. They're away on safari, but had you seen them, you would know that I'm stating the fact. The desired results in foreign policy will be achieved through the teamwork of government ministries and agencies that include and not limited to trade, agriculture, treasury, labor, among others. After all, ours is a foreign policy of the Republic of Kenya, and not a single ministry or organ of the government. Kenya continues to leverage its soft diplomacy tools, such as cultural exchanges, training, capacity building, peace interventions, sports, and art. Our sports people, especially athletes, continue to raise our flag and image globally. Kenya will also promote sports tourism by hosting and supporting international sporting events. In our grand strategy, we shall support creative arts by marketing Kenya as a film production destination and supporting the internationalization of local film production and content. This will go a long way to develop the creative economy and further support Kenya's projection of its soft power diplomacy. The establishment of a pool of veterans for mediation and special envoys on peace, technology, and the blue economy, for instance, is part of the grand schemes in projecting Kenya's image to attract investment, promote tourism, and strengthen diplomatic ties. What do I talk of pool of veterans? I mean no ill will. I was told that Professor Macharia often goes to the gym. But there's a reservoir of diplomats, of people who are schooled in this area. Some have served in public space, some have served in academia. We wish to state here that we want to draw on this pool of veterans for aspects of mediation and special challenges that we face as we look at our foreign and diplomacy going forward. Diaspora engagement has been invigorated to contribute to Kenya's national development agenda. The government of Kenya has designated a fully fledged State Department for Diaspora Affairs under a principal secretary. As one of the pillars of our foreign policy, diaspora diplomacy aims to harness the diverse skills, knowledge, expertise, and resources of Kenyans abroad and facilitate their integration into the national development agenda. The diaspora are our cultural and economic ambassadors. Now, this is very interesting to you. The Central Bank of Kenya revealed that remittances by Kenyans abroad in the 12 months to November 2023 was at $4.19 billion, up from $4.028 billion in the same 2022. Asked from tea, from coffee, and from horticulture. If they coughed, our shilling will be in trouble. That is now the reality. So, for Kenya, one of our intentions is to continue to engage global partners to diversify and increase international employment opportunities. Kenya has centralized diplomacy to position itself as a regional frontrunner in the digital diplomacy sphere. Tech diplomacy facilities, diplomatic outreach and networking, enhances global visibility and cultural exchanges. Tech diplomacy offers a novel way to negotiate, cooperate, and address pressing global challenges of our time, such as climate change, industrialization, digital divide, cybersecurity, misinformation and disinformation, and rapidly advancing information space. The appointment of the Special Envoy for Technology attests to the significance that Kenya attaches to this tech diplomacy. I can also tell you that the gentleman I refer to here is also a young man. We are grateful that our foreign policies are actively executed by our President, His Excellency President William Ruto, who plays the role of Kenya's chief diplomat. He has also cut an international niche in the matters of climate change. For instance, the Africa Climate Summit, hosted by Kenya, reignited action and discussions on carbon markets, climate financing, and unlocking Africa's green energy potential. Kenya continues to pitch on summit diplomacy, which has seen the President lead our foreign policy from the front, directly engaging other heads of state and government. Summit diplomacy ni hile ya juju. The emerging trend today is the continuous use of high-level visits, including state visits, by state leaders to derive their foreign policy agendas. This is why, like other strategic world leaders, the President and the Prime Cabinet Secretary have invigorated our foreign engagements through trips abroad to various strategic partners. Finally, Kenya's foreign policy runs on vigorous diplomacy and not aggressive confrontation. One that is more decisive, with more pointed national interests, and not transactional. Quiet diplomacy, rather than trumpet diplomacy, remains the foremost instrument of foreign policy in Kenya's harmonious relations with other states. This will, of course, be guided by research-based decision-making, and this is where you really come in as an institution and as academia. In this regard, the Foreign Service Academy will be a key resource. Through the academy, the ministry will also engage relevant government and non-governmental research institutions like USIU, civil society, and think tanks. Let me now make my concluding remarks. In sum, Kenya's foreign policy priorities will include crafting and deepening the right diplomatic ties that will contribute to addressing domestic policy demands. invigorating economic diplomacy, expanding international cooperation, deepening and expanding regional integration to promote the African Continental Free Trade Area objectives, contributing to regional stability to accelerate economic development, championing climate justice and equitable response to pandemics, being at the front line of technological diplomacy, diversifying transnational employment opportunities for our citizens, elevating globally relevant Pan-Africanism, advancing global reforms in multilateral financial and socioeconomic organizations, and promoting the equitable application of international law. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, it may be of interest for you to note that there was the African Climate Summit. There is the Africa Fertilizer Summit that is coming to Kenya. The President of Kenya has been requested to work in conjunction with the World Bank at the end of April to host another international summit to lead in the call for the replenishment of the IDA 21 replenishment. IDA 21 is the World Bank concessionary window where developing nations can access resources at concessionary rates, perhaps interest rates of about 1% or less than 1%, repayment of maybe 30 to 40 years with a grace period of maybe 10 years. This kind of funding is what is ordinarily called concessionary funding. So our president, again, is at the center of such a convention. Over and above that, Kenya, also as a leading financial hub, is going to host the annual meetings of the African Development Bank in Nairobi. This I'm putting out to you so that you can conceptualize that the foreign policy that has been driven in the last 1.5 years by the President has raised eyebrows and has raised positive interest in Kenya. You can imagine if he had been elected and then he decided to lie low and do nothing about profiling Kenya abroad. Would this attention have come to Kenya and the attendant positive dividends that we all anticipate to reap from this vigorous foreign policy? At the heart of our national interests lie the following economic diplomacy, meant to ramp up the bottom-up transformation economic agenda, global health diplomacy that has culminated in diplomatic agreements aimed at elevating our health sector, cultural diplomacy, especially sports and creative arts, meant to diversify global opportunities for our youths, diaspora, engagements, regional peace diplomacy, leadership for development, climate change, and maritime domain diplomacy. Today, Kenya has evolved from the perceived limited geopolitical roles to regional and global prominence. Kenya's geopolitical ascent under President Ruto's leadership has made our country the strongest link in the chain of regional and continental unity. The position of our country is not fringe. We are at the center of decision-making to answer regional and global diplomatic questions. In fact, in May, the President of Kenya has also been invited by President Biden for a state visit, the first for an African leader since 2008. The first for an African leader since 2008. Therefore, I would want to agree with today's thesis that we shall be exposing our country to diplomatic self-harm if we do not start thinking deliberately about designing and implementing a grand strategy. We will have to work together with you on this. We must make it a truly Kenyan grand strategy. And that is why I said we will make sure that we now engage Parliament more, and with public participation also engage the academia and Kenyan citizenry even more, and our friends as well. Indeed, let me just come to the final few statements by this good gentleman, Zhuge Liang, from the Far East. His quote or his statement was as follows: "The wise win before the fight, while the ignorant fight to win." Let me repeat. The wise win before the fight, while the ignorant fight to win. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, strategic planning, our whole aspect of the grand strategy, becomes essential. Let us draw from this very short statement. Let us be wise. Let us win before the fight. Because if we fall into the realm of the ignorant, where we have to fight to win, it shall be too expensive and detrimental to the people of Kenya. Before I conclude, may I pay tribute to former foreign affairs ministers on whose shoulders we are standing to continue projecting the grand strategy of our foreign policy. These include Agwin Skothek, Mbiu Koinange, Njoroge Mongai, Munya Wayaki, and Dr. Robert Ouko, to name just a few. To end, I wish to recognize and thank the leadership here, the School of Humanities and Social Sciences, and indeed the University for running this research seminar on grand strategy. This is a great contribution to the progress of our republic because it trains a critical mass of the next generation leaders, knowledgeable in international relations, strategic thinking, that enables them to design, implement, and review Kenya's grand strategy. Thank you very much. Asanteni sana. Before I sit, let me just acknowledge that in here we have from Foreign Affairs Ambassador Kennedy Mukaya, if you can stand. I don't know whether he's still within. Yes, there he is. We have Peter Orutere. He's in charge of strategic communications. Rina Undego, a policy advisor. Kenneth Onacha. Joshua Eshitiko. Alfred Eshikuta. Mary Odongo. Martin Adams, Maureen Chemutai, I think she's somewhere. Why am I mentioning these good people? Because I am not in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs alone. I work with very able men and women. And what I have brought out is a collective thought, a deliberate debate amongst ourselves to be able to bring some coherent message around the grand strategy. So it is important and always important that we also honor and acknowledge the people we work with. Thank you.
Another round of applause for His Excellency. I told you he'll speak in a very calm voice. He's going to deliver a very powerful speech, and he has done it, hasn't it? He has done it. And so, since he has been very comprehensive and concise, we are going to invite Professor Musalia Mudavadi to lead a question and answer session. We won't keep you for long. I promised you. We'll take about 10 minutes for Q&A. And then we round it up. Is that okay? So thank you so much. You know, there's a joke about Nigerians and Kenyans. A Nigerian asked a Kenyan, is it true that in Kenya, when you guys are asked a question, you answer with another question? And the Kenyan asked, who said that? So with that, I wish to invite Professor Musalia Mudavadi to take us to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. You lived up to the billing. And we have Chris, the chairman, and Amos, the DVC. I think that document should be given a special treatment in a special place within the university. And I think also the academy should also do the same, because it will be a reference document in future as to what Kenya stands for and its objectives and its place. Now, we are going to have brief, short questions, and we are going to, I think we'll take 3 questions at a time, depending on the time. And as Professor Iraki said, make it short. And our word, don't try to give your own speech. Just ask a simple question, less than half a minute, so that you can accommodate as many people as possible. Let me start on this side. Is there, that side is still thinking, this side? So, at the back there is a hand there. Just a short question.
Thank you, Professor Musalia. Thank you, Excellency. My name is Vanessa Ngunjiri. Soft diplomacy has worked for Kenya so far, and we've been a global diplomat leader as well as regionally. The question is, with the way the world is changing, especially politically, and also the climate that is there, do we think that soft diplomacy is going to sustain us further, given that we do not give any hard stance, for example, on the issues such as the war between Ukraine and Russia and the situation in Palestine at the moment? Do we think that soft diplomacy will sustain us much further, or will we need to pick hard lines at some point? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. The gentleman over there. Make it short. Then we shall come over here.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I am Bain Muyela Shiholo. My question is in regard to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Recently, as it was incorporated into the East African Community, and we also had the aircraft intervention in that country, and later the drawdown, and then followed by the intervention by the South African Community Development. So are we seeing a possibility of now DRC being wrestled away from the East African and then back to the South African Development Community?
Thank you. Anyone here? Yes. Over here. Give him a microphone. Make it short. And then I think we shall give the...
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much, PCS. I just want to ask one question that last week, Prof, you told us that you managed to get to Russia and they are doing well in terms of economically, they are doing fine. But probably as Africans, we've been complaining that the Russia-Ukraine war has really affected Africa. I just want us to understand why is it that Russia as a country has not been affected, but basically African countries have been really affected economically. Thank you.
Okay. I think His Excellency may attempt to give a better answer. Your Excellency, would you like to deal with those first? Okay, please.
Okay, thanks. First of all, let me say that I'll definitely share our remarks with the university so that ample people can have time to interrogate it. The soft diplomacy has always served us well, so we are not about to abandon it. And in my remarks, I did emphasize this quite a number of times. There may be challenges, but diplomacy is always about trying to resolve those challenges. And in diplomacy, you will always have what you might sometimes even call backroom channels of conversation. The leaders may be arguing very, very ferociously, but normally you'll find that behind those leaders, there are people, individuals, men and women, who can actually engage in soft conversations that will eventually end that ferocious argument. So soft diplomacy is always important. On the issue of the Palestine, Kenya stands with what the UN approved many years ago, that the solution is a two-state solution. We are very clear on that both states, both people must be given the right so that we can have a two-state solution on the conflict in the Middle East. On the Ukraine and Russia issue, you will recall that Kenya stood out very, very clearly that the issue of sovereignty, territorial integrity, must be upheld. And one of the first people to speak to this issue was our then ambassador in New York, Kimani. He made a very forceful statement on this matter. So we have spoken to these two issues. The issue of DRC, as we said, we want the East African community to grow. So we want DRC to remain a member of the East African community. They are members, and nobody is evicting them from the membership. They are an integral part of the East African community, and they will have a lot to add in terms of the economic prosperity in the East African community. As regards to the forces, the mandate that was given to the East African community force then was to have a 1 year of peacekeeping. That was the issue. And we finished that tour of duty as the East African Community Force of 1 year of peacekeeping. And if we follow carefully, for the period that they were there, the tensions subsided. So we did our job as an East African community peacekeeping intervention team. Now, it's important for me to highlight that there is peacekeeping and there's peacemaking. When you engage, be very clear what is the mandate. The mandate of the East African Force was peacekeeping. Now, we don't know the full mandate as yet, but if the DRC, maybe in the context of SADC, if the mandate then becomes peacemaking, then you see your level of engagement changes. Because peacekeeping and peacemaking, the terminology is different. One might force you into engagement, and the other is to make sure that you restrain people from engagement. So that was the mandate that we had. As to the issue of the impact of the Ukraine war on the economies of Russia and others in Europe and Africa, I would just really request that you can have access to a lot of data. There are quite a number of entities where you can get data on the impact of these wars. In Kenya, for instance, it has disrupted supply chains when it comes to fertilizer and so forth. And then it has been compounded that our raw material, our critical imports now have to take the longer route round through the Cape and then back north, which means the lead time for delivery has shifted maybe from 2 weeks or 3 weeks to something like 6 weeks or even a month or so, over and above the period, because the ships have to go further. What we can say is that so far we may be lucky that we still have a fairly steady supply of our raw materials and essential materials, either for industry or for very essential services. But the disruption is there. If you look at the impact of what could be happening to Russia, you may, as I said, I don't want to go too deep into some of these issues, but when you have sanctions, global sanctions, of about 6,000 to 7,000 of your commodities, then surely it will have an impact on your economy. So there are definitely sanctions that are affecting these countries, even including Russia, and those sanctions will have an impact on the economy. So it's not absolutely correct if somebody says there's no impact. I think there's an impact. The question is, to what extent? But that can only be answered by the Russians themselves.
Now, we have 2 more questions. Hey, the hands have gone up. Since we have not had a lady, let's have this lady.
Thank you so much, Prof, and thank you, Excellency. My name is Shekaina, and my question is, how will the Kenyan's grand strategy enhance the femicide laws and rules, especially because it's an ongoing crisis right now in our country?
Okay, thank you. This side? Yes, at the back over there. No, at the back. And that will be the last.
Hi, my name is Rafael Gaitho. My question was, is Kenya looking to adopt one of the Norwegian methods for peacekeeping? There was a time that the government deployed troops without weapons to South Sudan and also Haiti? Yeah. And do you think if that is effective?
Okay, thank you. I apologize as much as I would like all of you to ask. We are constrained. Your Excellency.
Thank you. If I got it right, the first question was about femicide. What I would say is that I did make reference to the need to have robust and effective institutions. Because if we are to be a civilized nation, we should not allow people to get away with femicide. And therefore, institutions that investigate and deal with this kind of challenge have got to be strengthened, both financially and in terms of human resource and even with technology, so that we can get away from the kind of challenges we've been seeing, where our young people are being murdered recklessly. And it does not, that kind of blemish is not good for our country. So we have to be very strict in ensuring that this does not happen. And I can tell you that away from the foreign policy, the security agencies are tightening a lot of things. And the Minister for Interior is going to be gazetting certain regulations that will add to the security of our people. For instance, in some of the areas or premises that our people have, our young people have lost their lives, for instance, there's no record of who came in, who went out. They don't have CCTV. They have nothing. So the lives of our people are in danger because such kind of environment where there's really no notion of security, no iota of security, is not the place to be. But we want to make sure that even the licensing that goes with such premises, even as Kenyans look for different ways of earning a living in terms of converting some of their premises to hotels and so forth, there must be certain standards that guarantee the security of all the people who patronize or end up being clients within those hotels for food or for residents, as tourists or as Kenyan citizens. We must protect everybody. So let me just emphasize that particular issue. If we were seeing every day that there's femicide and people dying, it hurts us. It will make us now make even more trips and try to explain ourselves. So we don't want to be explaining ourselves for negative reasons. We want to be explaining ourselves for positive things. And therefore, femicide should not be allowed to thrive. On the issue of Haiti and other areas, as I said, Kenya has been quite prominent. Now for over 40 years, Kenya has been involved in international peacekeeping efforts. So when the debate is there on Haiti and others, it's not the first time that Kenya is getting involved. Kenya was involved in West Africa. Kenya was involved in Namibia. Kenya has been involved in East Timor. Kenya has been involved in Kosovo, Serbia. So Kenya has gone to all these places for peacekeeping efforts. And therefore, when we look at the aspects of our neighbors and even beyond, it is something that we do because we want to be amongst honorable members of the international, we want to be members of an honorable international community. And a tragedy anywhere will eventually find its way. You can, if I give an example, there was the massive immigration, or migration rather, to Europe very many people crossing, risking their lives from the Sahel region, trekking many kilometers, and then finding their ways into ramshackle boats to cross the Mediterranean and to find themselves in Europe. First, there was restraining, there was trying to block all those people, and then later it became apparent that if you want to solve a migration problem, you don't deal with it at the end. You actually go to the source and try and solve it at the source. And the source means going to help bring peace in the Sahel region. It means going to help to bring peace in Haiti and other places, because this is how civilized people are supposed to live. If gangs succeed in Haiti, what stops them from encouraging gang mentality in Kenya? If gangs think that they can succeed in one country, it will be only a matter of time, because they'll export those bad habits into Kenya. So we don't wait for them to come here. As a reasonable international community, we must deal with the crisis in Haiti, help the people of Haiti have peace, and get the ones who are gangs behind bars. And this should be an international effort. It's not Kenya as a single entity, because there's been a notion that perhaps it's Kenya alone. No, it's not. It's a multinational security support. It brings together other nations. And resources must also be mobilized by other nations, so that it is not a drain on Kenya's exchequer, on the Kenyan taxpayer, because this is an international intervention, and therefore it must be funded internationally. I hope I've helped in dealing with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We shall close this round, but I would like to add a little bit. Your Excellency, USIU and the IR program is ready and willing to cooperate. And since I see the chairman of IR here, let me just ask him to wave. Moses, wave your hand. So let the chairman of the department, Moses Onyango. So, and with the chairman of the council and the DVC here, we commit to do what needs to be done. And now hand back to the MC to continue doing the good job.
Thank you so much, Professor Musalia Mudavadi, for fielding those questions. Now we've come to the end of our wonderful session. At this juncture, I'll invite Audrey and Clara to come and pass a vote of thanks to His Excellency and make a small presentation. 1 minute to go.
Good evening. My name is Audrey Adhiambo, a PhD student and international relations. Our chief of guest, Prime Cabinet Secretary, all protocols observed. Good evening.
Good evening.
On behalf of all students, faculty, and the audience at large, I'm glad to be standing here to express my vote of thanks. A special thanks to our chief guest, Honorable Dr. Musalia Mudavadi, for accepting our invitation and for being here with us today, not only to share your knowledge on the topic of Kenya's grand strategy, but also to spare some time to answer our questions. We'd like to thank you very much for your time. We also like to thank our interim Vice Chancellor, Dr. Lola, our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Transformational Teaching and Learning and Research, Dr. Professor Amos Njuguna, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Elizabeth Kalunda. Thank you to our heads of department, and most of all, Professor Musalia Mudavadi, for always supporting and guiding us on our educational journey, by inviting important guests to share with us real-time examples and to empower and educate us. To my fellow students who have always been patient with your time, making an effort to quench your thirst for knowledge, remember education is power, and with power you can not only make a difference, but build development. In a special way, we want to thank our heads of department and all of us, most importantly, Professor Macharia Munene, and of course, our gratitude goes to the USIU IR department. And some of us will never have had the privilege to meet, greet, and learn from our Prime Cabinet Secretary of Kenya, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. We do not take this for granted. Lastly, thank you to each and every staff from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in collaboration with the USIU Africa staff for ensuring that this evening goes as planned. From all of us, asante Bwana Honorable Dr. Mudavadi, and karibu tena USIU.
Good evening. My name is Clara Mutabai. On behalf of USIU Africa, on behalf of Professor Macharia Munene's International Relations class on Grand Strategy, and also would like to thank Mercy for making this possible for sure. We appreciate that. We won't give you roses, because they may wither. And just like the impactful knowledge you've given to us and shared with us, we'd like to give you an impactful gift from USIU Africa.
Thank you very much, Audrey and Clara. We have come to the end. Your Excellency, with your indulgence, we would like to have just two photographs, one with PhD students and MA students, and the second one with faculty and staff. Just two, and then you remain seated. We allow His Excellency to depart, then we follow. Thank you so much for your patience. So, camera, please move fast.